For 2 days, the football world has been picking apart the ugly scenes that followed the World Cup final. Paredes grabbing Eric Garcia by the throat. Gavi rustled to the turf. Molina squaring up to Rodri. Assistant coach Roberto Ayala appearing to strike Dani Olmo. Argentina's players turning their backs on Spain during the trophy ceremony. Pundits calling it disgraceful. Fans calling it unacceptable. FIFA opening an investigation, deleting a red card, then opening the investigation anyway. And through all of it, one side of this story has stayed almost completely silent: Spain. That silence has finally started to break, and what's coming out of the Spanish camp is a lot more restrained and honestly a lot more interesting than anyone expected. Let's start with what actually happened on the pitch, because it's worth understanding exactly what Spain's players were reacting to before we get into what they've said about it. Spain won the World Cup final 1-0 after extra time, with a late goal from substitute Ferran Torres, settling a tense, cagey match that neither side had been able to break open in 90 minutes. Argentina, playing as defending champions, had leaned on a physical, disruptive approach all tournament, and the final was no different. 5 of their players were booked over the course of the match, and Enzo Fernandez was sent off late on for a second yellow card. Argentina finished the game with 10 men, and still very nearly dragged it to penalties. Then the whistle went, and everything after that had nothing to do with the football. Spain's bench emptied to celebrate with their teammates, the way benches always do when a World Cup is won. As Spain's players ran past Argentina's Nahuel Molina, he appeared to throw a punch into the side of Rodri, Spain's captain and the tournament's standout player. Rodri stopped, turned, and squared up to Molina. That's when things escalated fast. Eric Garcia stepped in to help his captain, and that's when Leandro Paredes arrived and went straight for Garcia's throat, shoving him backwards as Argentina boss Lionel Scaloni rushed over trying to physically separate everyone. Paredes then turned on Gavi, grabbing him by his substitute's bib, wrestling him to the ground, and continuing to push into his face while several Spanish players, Borja Iglesias among them, crashed in to pull him away. Off to the side, footage also appeared to show Argentina's assistant coach going after Dani Olmo. Referee Slavko Vincic reached for a red card and sent Paredes off after the final whistle had already gone, a genuinely rare thing to see at a World Cup final. And then, in a twist nobody saw coming, that red card quietly vanished from the official match record less than 48 hours later. FIFA told the BBC it had been incorrectly displayed on the tournament's commentator information system and was subsequently deleted, meaning that, on paper, Paredes was never actually sent off at all. That explanation went down about as well as you'd expect. Former FIFA referee Keith Hackett called it a further blemish on the tournament and said a red card, once shown and reported by match officials, has to be processed properly rather than quietly erased. Whatever the reasoning, deleting the card didn't make the story go away. The footage was everywhere, and the backlash over the disappearing red card became its own controversy on top of the original one. Within a short window of that story breaking, FIFA's disciplinary committee announced it had appointed a disciplinary and ethics prosecutor under Article 36 of the FIFA Disciplinary Code to formally investigate the post-match incidents. Paredes, Molina, Diego Almada, and Roberto Ayala all named as part of that review. So the card is gone from the record, but the investigation is still very much alive, and possible sanctions for individuals and potentially for the Argentine Federation itself remain firmly on the table. Now, here's where Spain comes in. Through all of that noise, Spain's players and coaching staff have said almost nothing publicly. No fiery press conferences, no demands for FIFA to throw the book at Paredes, no viral quotes slamming Argentina's conduct. For a squad that had every reason to come out swinging, their own captain was shoved, one of their young stars was thrown to the ground, their celebration was hijacked by a brawl. The restraint has been notable. It's actually been Argentina's own players doing more of the public talking, with Paredes posting an emotional message on social media, thanking Argentina and expressing pride in the team, without directly addressing his role in the brawl at all. Enzo Fernandez did something similar, calling it an honor to have represented the shirt. Spain, by contrast, mostly let their football and their trophy do the talking. And when you go back and look at how the day actually ended, that restraint was visible even in the moment. While Paredes was grappling with Gavi, other players from both sides were doing something completely different just a few yards away. Spain's teenage sensation Lamine Yamal shared a warm, respectful embrace with Lionel Messi, win and chaos happening almost side by side on the same patch of grass. When the medals were handed out, Spain's players actually formed a guard of honor for Argentina as the runners-up walked up to collect their silver medals, applauding them. Argentina did not return the gesture, turning their backs on Spain's players during the trophy lift instead. So even in the smallest details of that ceremony, you can see two very different responses to the same chaotic day. The closest thing we've gotten to Spain actually breaking silence on the brawl itself came from Rodri, the one player who was physically at the center of the flashpoint that kicked the whole thing off. Speaking afterward, Rodri kept his account brief and matter-of-fact, saying simply that he pulled himself away because he wasn't looking for trouble. He described turning back to find the situation had spiraled into full chaos, with Paredes tangled up in confrontations with several of his Spain teammates. No outrage, no demand for punishment, just a captain describing what he saw and making clear that walking away, not escalating, was his instinct in the moment. That tone, calm, factual, almost deliberately understated, seems to be the house style coming out of the Spanish camp right now, and it's worth asking why. Part of it is simple. Spain won. When you're the team lifting the trophy, there's very little incentive to spend your victory lap talking about your opponent's discipline problems instead of your own achievement. Complaining publicly about Paredes doesn't add anything to Spain's story. It just drags their celebration back into someone else's mess. There's also a competitive read here. Speaking out forcefully against Argentina, demanding suspensions, doing interviews about how disgraceful the scenes were, none of that changes the result. Spain already have the only thing that matters. Coach Luis de la Fuente throughout this tournament has consistently spoken about Argentina and Scaloni in respectful, almost admiring terms, even ahead of the final itself, calling Argentina a side with big personalities and huge talent. That posture of respect toward a rival, even a rival that just tried to fight your players after the whistle, appears to be a deliberate choice rather than an accident. It also puts Spain in a fairly strong position from a public relations standpoint, whether that was the intention or not. While the loudest voices condemning Argentina have been outside pundits, Gary Neville, Alan Shearer, Keith Hackett, former players like Gabby Agbenalor, who was particularly blunt, arguing that no matter how angry you are about a loss, there are appropriate ways to handle that anger, and a World Cup final pitch against a 21-year-old opponent isn't one of them. Spain's own players haven't needed to say any of that themselves. The condemnation is happening anyway, loudly, from every corner of the football world, without Spain's players having to spend a single quote on it. They get to be world champions and let everyone else do the talking about how their opponents behaved. That's not to say there's no frustration in the Spanish camp at all. It would be strange if there wasn't, given what their players actually went through on that pitch. But if there is frustration, it's being handled internally rather than through headlines. No player has come out and called for Paredes to be banned for 10 matches. Nobody has demanded the Argentine Federation be sanctioned. The public tone from Spain has essentially been, we won, our conduct spoke for itself, and we're going to let the people whose job it is to hand out punishments, FIFA's disciplinary committee, handle the rest. Considering FIFA has now appointed a prosecutor and opened a formal Article 13 investigation into potential breaches of basic conduct rules, that patience might well be rewarded regardless of anything Spain's players say publicly. There is an argument, of course, that more outspoken anger from Spain's dressing room might have applied useful pressure at exactly the moment FIFA was quietly deleting that red card from the record. Public campaigns from wrong parties have moved disciplinary needles before in football. Spain choosing largely to stay above the fray means the loudest calls for accountability have come from outside voices and former officials, rather than from the players who were actually shoved, grabbed, and thrown to the ground. Whether that changes the eventual outcome of FIFA's investigation is impossible to say, but it's a notable strategic choice from a squad that had every justification to make plenty of noise and chose largely not to. So where does this actually leave things? Spain are world champions for a second time, and the manner of that win, a gritty, extra-time victory over a stubborn, defensively disciplined Argentina side, is genuinely a strong footballing story on its own, even before any of the chaos afterward. Their players, for the most part, have let that achievement speak for itself, rather than getting drawn into a public back and forth with Argentina over the brawl. Rodri's brief, calm account of pulling away from trouble is about as close as we've gotten to Spain addressing what happened, and even that was more description than accusation. Meanwhile, the disciplinary process grinds on without them needing to say another word. FIFA's prosecutors reviewing potential breaches connected to Paredes, Molina, Almada, and Ayala. The red card saga is still an open sore for people like Hackett, who think the whole process has been handled poorly, regardless of what sanctions eventually come down. And Argentina's players, for their part, have mostly framed their public statements around pride in the team and the tournament run, rather than addressing the brawl head-on either. It's an unusual shape for a story this big to take. Normally, the aggrieved side is the loud one, and the side under investigation goes quiet. Here, it's almost the opposite. Argentina's players posting emotional tributes to their World Cup run, and Spain's players saying remarkably little at all, content to let a trophy, a guard of honor, and an ongoing FIFA investigation do the talking for them. We'll keep following this as FIFA's prosecutor moves toward an actual ruling, and if any Spanish player or coach does end up speaking more directly about the brawl itself, that'll be the next update in this story. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.